Hi, welcome to the Tea and Popcorn Podcast, the podcast where we talk about film, culture, and behind the scenes trivia. And for this episode, we are talking about the film Dream Scenario. In the conversation that I have with my guest Tyrone, we talk about the themes of Dream Scenario, about fame, infamy, as well as accidental fame and virality. Although this was filmed in November of 2024, I feel like this conversation is still relevant, regardless of some of the timely references that we made. A bit of disclaimer, I don't know what's going on with my audio in this episode. For some reason, my AirPod mics were being used. So sorry if the audio is a little bit grainy on my end, but I enjoyed the flow of this conversation so much, so I decided to just keep it in, release it anyway. But without further ado, here's the episode. So sit back, relax, have this on in the background as you're doing chores, have this on in the background as you're working on a spreadsheet at work, and I hope you enjoy. Welcome everyone to the Tea and Popcorn Podcast. Today I have a guest, friends on the internet, and also I consider friends in life too, Tyrone, also known as the Circle Club. So welcome, Tyrone.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the invite.
Yes, absolutely. So can you tell me a little bit about yourself, about your platform, any new projects going on?
So the Circle Club I started in the pandemic. It was sort of like a space for people to come together about their film opinions, reviews, things like that. Just kind of like create a common community. I think a lot of times in this space, like when we talk about film, there's a lot of like prejudice. People are kind of get elitist, right? Like I'm a space where we can enjoy Gossip Girl one day, we can enjoy Game of Thrones the next day, like it's a wide spectrum of things and just like enjoying projects and, not just, the plots, but like, okay, behind the scenes and all this type of stuff. So I just try to create a space that feels like welcoming to everyone all over. That's kind of how we became friends. We have, a mutual friend online that we're with together now. And like, that's all of my space is. But I've been doing a lot of projects and things like that offline. But I'm excited that this is the first one I've done in a long time. I love your space that you've created where you've invited other people in. Your Monday memes get me through the day every time, by the way.
Oh,
Love
thank
that.
you.
So yeah.
Thank you so much. We are going to talk about Dream Scenario. It's starring Nicolas Cage, and it's about a man who finds himself going viral in a sense because he appears in multiple people's dreams. And then it's just him navigating that situation. Tyrone, what are
Yeah.
your thoughts on the movie?
Yeah, so it's funny. I started my intro being like, "Oh, we accept all types of movies and things like that." But the one genre I don't really touch a lot is horror. Actually, like I don't really touch horror. I will do psychological thrillers. Why not? I'm sort of a chicken. Maybe it's the PTSD in me. Who knows? but no. All jokes aside, like I thought, this was. I was like you. I was like, I like Nicolas Cage. I thought the concept was cool. I thought it was timely. Being someone who has been online and has made viral content and stuff like that to happen, like it's interesting. It's fascinating, like how you sort of get pigeonholed sometimes and like becomes your identity and like. And I just thought it was like a very cool, timely story and like an interesting way to go about it. And I'm like slowly starting to dip my toes into the horror field, and I think movies like this one, Midsummer, it kind of has that like it's horror element, but at the same time, like Get Out, right? Like it's
Hmm.
horror, but at the same time, it's enough to dip your toes in. So I'm starting to get my confidence built. So that's kind of what Dream
Yeah.
Scenario was for me.
Yeah.
And but no, like as far as the actual film. I loved it. This was one that I really had no expectations going into. I thought like a lot of the themes were really well done. In the entire time I was watching it, like it was one of those movies where I'm just kind of like, what's going to happen next? Where's this going? Like, what are we saying? Right? Like, what's that sort of bigger message? And I really enjoy
Hmm.
stories like that. And I thought, Nicolas Cage's performance, being in all these different dream scenarios, no pun intended, and
Yeah.
the different supporting actors being involved, Michael Cera, his sort of role too, like everything felt very intentional with this, and I thought it was a special film, and it was one that I almost missed too. This was on my catch up series as well, but I really enjoyed it. So, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I absolutely enjoyed it too. I thought it was really well done and it actually exceeded my expectations. Now, I was not expecting how dramatic that it was going to be. And and we'll get into that later on. But yeah, definitely this film is, I would say it's kind of like a gateway horror film. Another
Yeah.
film that's very similar in that I also reviewed was Trap, with our friend Marley. And that's
Hmm.
also good, like kind of beginner horror film. That's what we were talking about in
Trap.
that episode. Yeah, Trap, M. Night
Mm.
Shyamalan. And honestly, a lot of Shyamalan films are really good, like intro horror film.
I've dipped my toes in some of those too, like Split and stuff. And yeah, yeah, I like
Yeah.
that. I'll definitely have to check that one.
Yeah, you definitely do need to. But yeah, back to Dream Scenario. I thought it was a very um interesting movie. I love the way that it was filmed. Actually, I do have a fun fact here about how it was filmed. It was actually shot in
Mm.
16 millimeter or Super 16. You
Yep.
definitely feel that. It has
Yeah.
that nice like film quality, and it kind of adds into the aesthetic of Dream and kind of like the surrealism of that. And yeah, I just think how the film was created, it also captures the absurdity of dreams.
You're absolutely right. I didn't notice that, but now that you're saying that, one that came to mind was the movie Black Swan. It kind of has that haunting feel to it.
Hmm.
I think this does a
Hmm.
very similar job where, like, as you're going throughout it, like, it almost feels like you're on that journey with him, and it's like creeping up on you. Like, no, I definitely see that. That's an interesting fact to share. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, Nicolas Cage is amazing in this. And it's so funny because he's playing a nobody, and it's kind of interesting. So the director of the film, he didn't really have any particular actor in mind. Then he's like casting Nicolas Cage, but it all works out because Nicolas Cage is just so transformative in his roles and how he acts and his charisma and whatnot. And they actually had
Yeah,
to just give him like a physical transformation to kind of normalize him a bit too. So
yeah, yeah.
Nicolas Cage actually decided on his hairstyles for the film, and they actually put a prosthetic nose on him, but it's very subtle. So it's like
Yeah,
that in
yeah.
between and kind of meta commentary on like this nobody gets fame, but also we have like one of the most famous actors in the world playing this nobody.
Literally. No, literally though, because it's funny you say that because I had a fun fact to bring in too about this is like I thought it was interesting that he was selected for this as a nobody because he did actually that year he did 6 films. The year
Yeah.
prior, I think he did like a couple, and like he's one of those actors who they come in and out of Hollywood, but like that year was like he was doing everything. He was in 6 movies, so it is interesting selection to pick someone like that, and it just goes to show too, like the performance that he did, that it was so well done because you really do forget it's him. Like not maybe necessarily like visually, but like you get lost in his performance. Like he's an underrated actor, like for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, let's just dive deep into Dream Scenario. In my notes when I rewatched it for this review, I called it an Icarus story. And it
Mm,
truly is that, where it's talks about, and if you know like the tale of Icarus, is he has these wings that are made out of I think it's wax, and he's trying to
mm,
fly, and
yep.
he's flying close to the sun, and then that's kind of where his
Yeah.
downfall is. So and it's such a cliche to call movies about fame Icarus stories, but I really truly feel like this is one. um what do you think?
Yeah. No, I mean, you know, this is it's an interesting story to talk about because like it's so timely and there's so many layers to it, but like just the plot, like yeah, Paul is who Nicholas Paul Matthews, who Nicholas Cage plays. He's just this professor who has this sort of simple life, right? And like it's interesting to use the Icarus comparison because Icarus obviously he was super ambitious and flew too close to the sun, which is why it's called that, right? But with Paul, it's interesting because he has this boring life. He's like I think a bio professor, right? Or,
Hmm.
or or something like that, where he's like studying like life, and then he has this like idea, this thesis, whatever, but that's all it is just an idea. He doesn't actually pursue it. It's just something he talks
Mhm.
about over and over and over again. And it's almost kind of like, okay, Paul, is this for your own like ego? Is this like actually for something you want to contribute to science? Who is this actually for, right? And then we see this thing where he starts to get famous and sort of selection, and the way it starts out is very like oh, that's very cute, and like it's like, oh, like Paul, and like, oh, it's like, wow, feel good story. Yeah, I had a dream about Paul. And then as
Mhm.
things sort of dive, and he accepts that, but he wants to originally be known for his work. So he's kind of like, okay, well, I have
Mhm.
this work, and people are just kind of like, we don't really care. We don't want to talk about that, right? So he starts to
Mhm.
lean into that ambition of the fame, and as the story sort of goes on, he starts to descend into like the cautionary tale per se of like Icarus. So I think that's like I get, like you said, it is a cliche to call it, but with this story, I can't think of another cautionary tale where just the guy starts to lose everything. So
Mhm.
I think that's a fair comparison.
Mhm. And this mostly is accidental fame because we don't know, and it's not even revealed in the story too, why he's going viral or why he's in people's dreams. And I think that
Yeah.
actually speaks volumes on how, since everyone has access now to becoming viral, especially if you are on
Yes.
social media, if you post something there, and if you have a public profile, you could become viral. So, what are your thoughts on how his story parallels to online virality?
It's funny that this is all sort of we're talking about this in like sort of like right after this American election and like turbulence, and I'm not gonna get into that, but like a viral sensation that happened was Moo Dang. Do you remember Moo Dang? So Moo Dang, when they first came out, was like this cute thing. Oh my god, I love Moo Dang. I love Moo Dang. Oh my gosh, like and then Moo Dang ends up selecting Trump as like who's going to like win the election, right?
Mhm.
Now, in Mudang's defense, Mudang is an animal just selecting whatever food is near
Yeah,
it,
they're
right?
trying to make Moon
But
Dang into like a groundhog, like Groundhog Day,
right, you know what I mean? And like, and so, but Mudang
president
selects
election.
Trump.
Like what?
Yeah, so Mudang selects Trump because Mudang's hungry, right? And so it becomes this whole thing online and X where people now hate Mudang. Mudang, you made this happen. Mudang, you're the reason we have this president. You know what I mean? And it's like, what a bit. Wait a minute. Last week we loved Mudang. We loved Mudang. Mudang was adorable. Now we hate Mudang. And it's
Yeah.
so fascinating to me that this is a story I think that is gonna resonate for a few generations because like that's exactly what happens to Paul in this story. That's
Mhm.
exactly what happens to Paul. It starts out, this sweet sort of story and then it just descends. And I think the real sort of theme of this story is the nature of fame and the perception of public perception. And like, I think like how quickly that public opinion can shift rapidly from adoration to like people condemning you. That's really
Mhm.
what this is all about. And we see this in real time. I mean, it has to feel
Mhm.
like once a month, right? I mean,
Oh,
I think back to
absolutely.
the very first viral thing that happened this year. Not to detract too much, was like there was this Cat Williams thing with Shannon Sharp, and then like it was
Mhm.
sort of funny, and this happens, right? We get down, 6 months later, Shannon Sharp is caught online doing something that people, thought was inappropriate or wild, right? And like these
Yeah.
things happen so quick, and you're just like, whoa, like I thought this was someone who was funny and beloved, and like, so I think this story just kind of goes to show, like, in this world where, because I grew up in the era, not to make myself unk here, but like I grew up in the era where you didn't even put yourself online. Your parents told you, you keep your pages private. Everyone is
Mhm.
public now. Everyone is public.
Everyone's
So when you
public.
post something, in your mind, you're going, okay, this is for my friends and family, or this is for like my small niche community. And all of a sudden, boom, something goes viral accidentally. And then now that becomes, there's so there's so much pressure with that. It becomes, does this become who I am? Is this now how I'm defined? Like, am I supposed
Mhm.
to repeat this success? Do I just let it fade out? Am I a fool to let it fade out? Should I capitalize on this? Like, and so that sort of human element with Paul, I think, is the most relatable, because I think you can kind of look at it like, well, Paul, you're a professor. Why didn't you just stick to that? But
Mhm.
that attention, that power, that like adoration that you're getting from other people, it's infectious, and it makes you. It happens so quick. You're reacting in real time. Like, and that's what I love about this story, is how realistic it is and how authentic it feels, and like how it could be any of us at any time. You know.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, have you had any experiences with accidental virality?
Oh yeah, I mean, um, one of my good friends, jumping on another jet on TikTok. You'll see, like, we've been making sketches and videos since we've been in college together, and just being silly on Snapchat, and like, we were listening to this song and decided to make like a little silly dance to it, and it was almost like we were almost mocking how people come up with dances for TikToks, and that was the one, of course, that blows up, right? And it just like,
Yeah.
and for him, and for him, and like, I'm not like, I'm not a dancer. Like, I dance when with my friends, and but I don't dance. I would never want to be known online as a dancer. That's not my thing.
Mhm.
But that kind
Yeah.
of became the thing, and then so like he was like, okay, I want to kind of get back into making comedy and sketches and funny things. But people were like, keep doing the dance, keep doing the dance, to the point,
Mhm.
Megan, to the point the artist reached out to him. And so like, yeah, and so he kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And then what ends up happening is, after a while, people go, oh, you fell off, you're only like, we want the
Mhm.
dance videos. Oh, you fell off, we want. And he's like, that's not all of who I am. And like, one
Mhm.
thing that happened with me personally was I made these videos on TikTok, and it was kind of like, they're like parodies about different stories. You're kind of making like, those viral videos where it's like, it'll have like Gilmore Girls, and it's like the first part of it, it's like, oh, I love Rory. And then the second half, it's like, God, she's so annoying,
Yeah.
So I made a ton of those, and that went viral on, TikTok. And then some people started stealing those and like making it as their own. And so part of me kind of felt like, dang, like this is mine. Like I want to like have credit for that, right?
Mhm.
But then so I started making more of those videos, and those videos did success. And then I pigeonholed myself where people are like, oh, we want more of that. We want more of that. So it's
Mhm.
this weird thing with like becoming viral and like having some success, where you're kind of like, you want it, and that's why you're doing this to some extent. But at the same time, you're like, for me, like, I just want to create a space that has like a community for people to talk, right? But you
Yeah.
get lost in
Yeah.
it, because when that fame, or, and it's not fame, but like, attention that you're getting, like
Yeah.
that short, like, you want more of it. You're like, oh, I want more, I want more. And then you start thinking about, okay, the opportunities, like, is this going to get me, oh wow, my friend, he got to meet the rapper that we made this dance to. So if I do this, am I going to get to meet, Lorelai and Rory Gilmore? You know what I mean?
You're
Like,
right.
you start like leaning into this type of stuff. And
Mhm.
I don't know, I'm conflicted. I'm curious what you think. Like, do you think when you have that viral moment, should you lean more into it? Should you like kind of stray away from it? Like, what's your thoughts?
Oh, that's such a good question. And I kind of think of it as two ways, and it kind of relates to the movie too, because at one point, Paul, he gets reached out to by a marketing agency, and they're trying to kind of basically they're an influencer marketing agency. They just don't say it in the movie, but
Yeah.
that's what they are. And
Michael Sarah. His
yeah,
character's
and that's
Trent.
Michael
Yeah.
Cera's character, which was such a pleasant surprise. And okay,
Yeah,
this
it
is kind
really
of an
was.
inside joke between our group chat, but we love Michael Cera because of Barbie and like just how Michael Cera is as an actor and
Right.
whatnot. So yeah, like literally our
Yes,
group chat
absolutely.
image is Michael Cera
Oh my God.
and
Literally.
Barbie playing
Love him.
Alan. But anyway, I digress. But yeah,
Yeah.
so uh, but they pitch all these ideas like because all that Paul is trying to do is write his book. And they were like, oh, cool. What's his book going to be about? Is it going to be about the dreams and all this other
Yeah.
stuff? But he's like, no, I want to write a book about birds. And they keep saying plants.
Right.
They're not even listening.
Right.
And it's just
Right.
like, so they're like, oh, okay, well, how can we twist this to kind of fit our narrative? And like, that's what you do in marketing. Like my day job is in
Yeah.
marketing. So it's like, okay, how
Yep.
is this going to fit for what? Okay, the audience wants his core audience, versus what's our
Yep.
business needs. So that's why they pitch things like, oh, let's try for you to get into Obama's dream because if you want to be a part of like intellectuals,
Right.
and
Yes.
then they pitch like brands like Sprite, and that's kind of like a thing too. So, but
Right.
it kind
Right.
of goes to the point of like, but to answer your question, Tyrone, it's like a double-edged sword because you you kind of want to be in that marketing mindset that's like, okay,
Yeah.
what can I do that's true to me, but that could also make me money and
Right.
like
Yeah.
also help make my audience feel happy. But then it's a
Mm-hmm.
double-edged sword because are you truly being true to yourself? And the story is like with Paul, he finds himself not really being true to himself at some point, and we'll get deeper into that later. But I'm going to share a little bit of like my accidental virality story.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Let's hear
And
it.
I feel like if you've been on TikTok, there's like some part where you get like viral at some point, but it's not like viral like
Yeah.
how virality used to be back when you
Right.
like back in early YouTube days where everyone has seen the video. It's like only a few
Yeah.
people have, but yeah,
No. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
actually I was kind of tossed between this two. So I did
Mm-hmm.
a commentary video on Disney, and it was actually a response to a comment about the animation of The Little Mermaid.
Mm.
And
Oh,
it
I remember this. Yeah. Yeah.
became
Yeah.
viral out of nowhere because oh no, actually wasn't originally it was supposed to be on The Little Mermaid, but then someone commented, oh, is this going to be like the animation, The Lion King, like the live action Lion King, whatever, and how they didn't emote. So I was kind of going off, and then a lot of people agreed with me, but of course it came the hate
Mm-hmm.
comments talking about, well, if you don't like the animation, don't watch the movie. And I'm like, that's not how critique works. Like, I'm not
No.
complaining
Yeah.
of no.
Right. Right. No.
And
Right.
then,
Exactly.
like, I made a couple
And
more
can I say
Disney.
something on
Oh
that
yeah,
real
of course.
quick? Like that's kind of what this is about to me too. Is it's like, you know, you like you said, you're really conflating these two ideas. Like these are very two different ideas here. Like I could like that story, but also want this to be something else. And like
Mm-hmm.
to even just put that narrative out there, it's like, well, why can't you just be happy, or why can't you just or don't watch it? It's like, well, then that's not critiquing, and that's kind of what we're doing here, right? Like we're giving feedback, and like that also doesn't mean that you can't appreciate the work that has gone into that, right? Like, but
Absolutely.
we're in this very like charged era of society where like you make a comment and it's like so definitive. People, I don't know, people really have lost the complexities of like a comment, an opinion, a feeling, and like
Mm-hmm.
that's what this story does so well to me. Really, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
but to go ahead, but
Oh,
yeah, I just
yeah, no,
yeah,
you brought up a really good point too, and I'll probably talk about this later on in another episode or something about like critique and whatnot because I kind of and the reason why I started this podcast, one of the reasons is because I kind of felt like there was a lack of nuance and critique like there used to be, especially in modern day. Uh, what we do is just like film reviews and commentary and whatnot. So that's another thing. But yeah, I just kind of found it
yeah,
really interesting. But kind of going back to my story is my videos for the longest time and probably still to this day have been videos where I talk about Disney. But here's
mm-hmm,
the thing about that is I would talk about Disney from both a business sense and from a just just a critical sense as far as like quality of their content as someone who studied film production in school. Like I would speak to it
yeah,
through that lens. And there's so much
right,
nuance to these conversations. But then
yeah,
like and this I started making a lot of that content in 2023. But by then it's like Disney had so much of a target on their back. It's a lot of like political outrage for some reason. I'm not gonna get into that. A lot
my
of
gosh,
the
yeah,
anti woke movement. And it's just but
oh my god,
also you introduce people from like that side and then you would also since it's Disney, it's family, I would get kids responding and I'm like, oh no, my content is not for children.
yeah,
So I
right,
had to, instead of like thinking, I was kind of like, oh, cool, this is nice. But then I was just like, no, I gotta stay true to myself because my audience, majority of my audience, they are like, I think my demographics are mostly 21 to 35 or so, which is about right.
Yep.
That's my age range. And I'm like, okay, I want to speak to
Sure.
people that are that age range, and we're not talking about
Sure.
Disney like that.
That's it's so interesting you said that because that's exactly, I mean, exactly what happened to me when I was making my memes. Like my audience has always like skewed like 60% female, 40% male, and then like that sort of same age range. And and for me, I think it's just because like I've tried to create a space where I'm like, yeah, I'm actually listening to your opinions. I'm hearing back the feedback, right? And like, but when I made those videos, for some reason, it landed with a younger audience that was like not understanding like the criticism, where it's like, oh, Lorelai's annoying because blah blah blah. I'm like, no, I know it's kind of part of the joke. Like we get that, right? But like we've lost some of that nuance. But then to your point, where it's like, okay, now do I keep this up to stay with this Disney sort of theme? But I'm not, and now I'm losing the audience that I originally kind of sought after, right? And when you think about Paul, like when Paul starts out, it's kind of this like sweet thing that he's doing. It's kind of the old man professor. Oh, ha ha ha! Like, oh, this is kind of curious. This is sort of interesting. And then like he tries to sort of like, okay, hey, this is this is who I am. I'm a professor. I like to study birds or whatever. And then once he sort of loses that audience with that virality, that's where like it all kind of goes downhill. So that's interesting that we both sort of had this parallel where we lost our audience in the virality, and that
Mhm.
also opens up a larger conversation, which I'm sure we'll get into, about public perception of who you are versus actual like who you are, and that's a lot what this story is about.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like about this film is how they depict different types of dreams. So you have like the quirky, really weird, absurdist dreams, which is what
Yep.
Paul starts out, what he's featured in. And then
Yep.
briefly, it talks about like sex dreams. And
Yeah.
I thought that was really funny, that sequence. But then where it kind of goes downhill is where the dreams start becoming nightmares. And that's
Yes.
where people turn on him. And
Yes.
that's kind of like, in my opinion, the worst part about virality is because people are not really seeing you as a person, but they're seeing you as
Yes.
the content that they saw you in. So they
Yes.
assume things about you. And that's the thing that kind of really got me for a little bit with my viral video is
Yep.
that people just assumed that I was just complaining just to complain instead of like, and not
Exactly.
even understanding the context of like, well, one, I was responding to someone else's comment, and
Right. Yep.
two, like,
You study
it was
this.
just
I mean, you went
jealous.
to school.
I went to
Like
school for it,
yeah.
so it's
Right.
just like, that's where it was like, oh, well, just watch the original movie. It's like, this is not about me saying, oh, I hate the live action
No.
Lion King and I rather
Right. Right. Right.
whatever,
And yeah,
so
and it's
it,
like, and there in that nuance that you bring to it, like you said, like the business side of it too. Like you
hmm
understand that sometimes even these products, they want to do something but they can't, from that business side of it. Like and
hmm
and you're because we live in this era where it's like quick 30 seconds, 15 seconds, even the 2 minute videos now, you make people are skimming through it with 2 times, 3 times speed. So you're not
hmm
really processing it the same way. They're
You're
missing
not.
all that nuance, and that's exactly what happens to you.
And there's like no reason, like, especially in this kind of like TikTok age, no one really goes and seeks out other people's videos. They will like and scroll and like move on, if that, or
Yeah.
comment and then just move on. And that's really, and it's so crazy because it's like the same students in the movie, the same students that loved their professor, loved Paul for all these
Yeah,
quirky
yeah.
dreams, and now they're afraid of him, and then it's actually affecting
Yes.
his real life. And kind
Right,
of on
right.
that note, I kind of want to ask, because this film does talk about cancel culture, and then Paul does get
Yeah.
canceled. Do you think that this is more so giving Paul the benefit of the doubt about being canceled, or more so the sense of giving people that have been canceled the benefit of the doubt?
Interesting. That's an
Mm-hmm.
interesting perspective. Um, I guess I thought about it, but I haven't. Like, I suppose what it really, the way I see cancel culture is sort of there's two sort of sides of the eye, where it's like there are people like R. Kelly, for example, or Harvey Weinstein,
Mm-hmm.
who they've been canceled because they've done egregious actions. Right? You deserve to be canceled. And then there are some people who do things that are sort of like, okay, maybe that wasn't the best, but they're human moments. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that human element is kind of more so what this is supposed to be about, to
Yeah.
kind of have empathy, because I don't necessarily think this is about, someone who's mega famous or, in giving them grace. This is more about, hey, look, this this could be you, this could be me, this could be anyone who has like a normal life going viral. Like, I'll give you just a quick example. Is like, you know, sometimes these people come up with you with like a microphone now, right? Think about
Yeah.
someone who's older. They come up with someone to a microphone and they're being interviewed and they think it's harmless. They think so, but someone's always trying to do the gotcha moment, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
they get this gotcha moment. Um, Honestly, they don't really deserve a lot of grace, but think about the Karen era, right? Where you're capturing all these
Yeah.
women. Some of these women, they may be horrible people. Some of them may just have been, they just had a bad day,
Bad day.
right?
Yeah.
You caught them on a bad day, and now that's forever how they're going to be perceived. And then
Mm-hmm.
to me, you said something interesting about how it sort of starts out the initial sort of bystander dreams. It's like people are just kind of like Paul's just watching them, or he's like in the garden, and it's lighthearted, right? And so people get curious about this stuff. And to use an example, like Zendaya and Tom Holland are in Boston right now. That's where I'm located. And so everyone that I know is like, they got them on their Snapchat and like they're curious, right? We're all curious. We all want to know, okay, a little bit more about these people. And then you get behind the curtain and you see Zendaya says, no, I don't want to take a photo. Why does she not want to
Oh
take a
yeah.
photo? Maybe she's late to work. Maybe she's busy. Maybe, her and Tom just got into an argument about something, right? Like, they're real people. But now, because she said no and it was caught on camera, now people are going to go, oh, she's mean. Oh, she thinks she's better than us. Oh, blah, blah, blah. And I think that's kind of more what this story is about, is like, less so about the Zendayas of the world, more about the Karens per se of the world who like had a bad day and kind of went off someone.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, at the same time, it does make you as a normal person go, I should give Zendaya a little bit grace when she says no, because they are human, they are real people. So I think it's not excusing cancel like the Harvey Weinsteins of the world. It's kind of more so like this everyday person kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what
Yeah.
I think. What's your perception?
Yeah. I think the same thing too. It's definitely more so of a cautionary tale for the rise and fall of internet virality and how quickly it can go. Um,
Yep.
and also just giving people some grace who became viral by accident. Because
Mm-hmm.
you never know, and I'm glad you kind of mentioned about this too, because that's kind of one thing I want to tap into is
Yeah.
how at one point, yeah, Paul was objectified by people. Like he has this encounter with a person that had a sex dream about him, and she
Yeah.
wants to
Yeah.
recreate that. And then she gets this,
Right.
I mean, it's a funny scene, but she wants to
Yeah.
recreate that, and then she gets like really
Right.
disappointed by it. That's like, but she knows that he's married and like all
Right.
this stuff, but she
Right.
does not care. She wants to recreate this fantasy of hers
Right.
um through that. And it's just kind of, it's
Yeah.
like it's both one thing that I do wish the movie kind of dived into, even though that scene does tap into this, but parasocial relationships, I wish it dived into that a little
So
bit deeper. Even though I think the
I
movie's
agree.
paced really well, but I think that would have like really drive things home. Or it could be another movie in general, but I wish that this is my only nitpick. Like otherwise, this is honestly, this is a 5-star movie in my opinion. But
Yeah,
if
no,
they
yeah.
were to kind of
I
want to
think I
dive a
had
little
it
bit
like that.
deeper,
Yeah, I was gonna say too on that too, because like the awkward dream that you mentioned. So to me, that's kind of one of the like main sort of things about this story too. Is it's like, you know, going back to the Zendaya idea, it's like that initial curiosity about these people, who they are, turns into scrutiny, and Paul's
Mhm.
image becomes less about who he is or what he's done, and more about what people are projecting onto him. And you're
Mhm.
sort of echoing how fame can kind of lead to this overexposure and like mockery of what you kind of do, right? So like, I think that's really, like you said, like it becomes this thing where she's like so interested in like when she realizes, you know, this is he's just like the rest of us. He has awkward moments. He's human. Now it becomes a scrutiny. And one thing I agree. I think they definitely should have made that parasocial thing. That I was surprised that they didn't lean into that more. Really, like I think
Mhm.
that was the one missing element, but they did do a really good job of like escalating it slowly from scene to
Mhm.
scene.
Mhm.
But I agree. I think that's definitely an area of opportunity. Was there a particular like dream or moment or scene that you kind of were like, oh, they could have done more about that with the parasocial relationship?
Not necessarily a particular dream because each of the dream sequences represented something in particular and definitely represented a stage of fame. I feel like the fandom parasocial side of it could have been explored more because it almost was like so abrupt from okay, this is a just okay, friendly, oh okay, like
My favorite dream.
funny dude, whatever,
Yeah.
to sex dreams to, nightmares where there could
Right.
have been
Right. Right.
something of like people like hanging out or something like that. I guess like so, but I think overall the pacing was good. Um, how do you feel about the apology scene? Where he gets canceled and then he makes this apology, but everyone wants to turn on him even after that.
So yeah, so I mean that kind of like to make it light is like Dang. Like it's like if Dang comes out and says, I'm sorry for like selecting, you know, Donald Trump for, you know, my food, it's where people have gone so like far gone that they've lost the plot, right? And I think with
Hmm.
Paul, that was probably the first time, like I felt bad for him, but that was the first time I think I felt genuinely bad for him because I was like, this is a guy who just wants to get his normal life back. But once
Yeah.
you've gone down that path, you can't. Tyler James, the guy who's on Abbott Elementary, everybody it's Chris, once
Yeah.
said he was like he has a really good quote where he's like, people always ask, you know, oh, what's great about this life or what's one advice? He's like, one advice I can give you is just enjoy what you have now because all it ever becomes is looking back. And
Hmm.
that really is what happens in this virality. Like once you kind of become known as this thing, that's what you get known. Like um South Park has touched on this with like, you know, some of the famous like viral YouTube videos and things like that. Too,
Hmm.
there's like a good example if you guys ever watched that show. But like, do you remember in like the YouTube era where it's like you know, Charlie bit my finger per se, like that type of like,
Yeah.
you know, video, like that like for Charlie bit my finger, that was a moment and it disappears. Today, it disappears, but if that were to happen today and he kind of was like, "Oh, I want to like be a singer," and he went to school and he like learned how to sing and all that, people won't let go of Charlie bit my finger. You know,
Hmm.
Mason Ramsey yodeling kid, right? Like
Oh
same
yeah.
exact thing. Like he's the yodeling kid forever. I went to a Lana Del Rey concert with my fiance, and he came out on stage and he was a fantastic singer. He was amazing. But everyone goes, "Oh my god, it's the yodeling kid." I'm like, that stinks. That sucks, right? Like you are
Yeah.
forever known as that. And like, so I felt for Paul in that moment, kind of being like, man, this is someone who like his life is over, whether he likes it
Hmm.
or not. And like, yeah, how did you feel about the apology?
Yeah, I mean, I thought his apology was good, but it kind of represents how critical people are of even internet apologies. At one point, where like I remember when Tana Mojo was doing an apology video a few
Mm.
years back, I was so caught up into commentary channels talking about and analyzing Tana Mojo's apology video and how like bad
Right,
it was and stuff.
right.
And I'm just like, wow, like I can't even really criticize the culture because I was the culture of that. Going on
Right,
YouTube,
right.
watching 30-minute analysis videos on what she's wearing, how she's editing it, what she's saying, and it's just like all this stuff, and I'm just like, man, people can't even apologize anymore. Now, I don't even remember what
Right.
Mojo was apologizing about because she's been in so
No.
many controversies. So, but at the
Right.
time, like, I was really like, oh man, I can't wait to see how people like, yeah. So, I mean, we're so
James
hypercritical
Charles,
of
Shane
things, and
Dawson, like,
and like one thing that I was also thinking about too with the rapidness of fame and infamy, big example is Chapel Roan because this was her
oh
year.
yeah,
But here's the thing. I've never seen something like as far as someone becomes so successful and very beloved to the point
yep,
where it comes to that parasocial like aspect with
yes.
her fans to the point where she's setting boundaries and then she gets
My God,
canceled for
yeah.
setting boundaries, right? And then she's like being
God bless.
honest about how she doesn't want to endorse any candidate during the election. And then people get mad at her for that. And it's just like,
It's
can you let
it's
this
it's
woman just
it's
live? It's so
yeah. No,
ridiculous.
it's crazy. And you know what's so funny about Chapel is like I started out and I was like I don't even know why, but I was like she's kind of annoying and like oh whatever, right? And then when she released that first sort of, I was like wow, this is so like authentic. I think I was sort of caught up in like she does like sort of like I don't know if that's the correct saying, drag almost, or
But
it's
yeah, she
like
does. Yeah, it's drag
she
makeup. Yeah. And she
okay yeah
considers
yeah yeah.
Chapel
So
Roan a drag queen. Yeah.
okay, that's what I thought. I just want to make sure I was, using the correct term. See, even me, I'm like, let's make sure you said the right thing.
Yeah.
But like, it's, and also respecting, right? But like, it's so I was like, is this all just sort of like performative? Like, is this very over the top? But then when she had this authentic moment that she's not, the chaperone makeup's off and all that, I like that about her. I really was like, wow, like this is so authentic. She's creating a barrier and like I know fame isn't for everyone. And she even said, it's kind of part of the job. Like, I get it, but like, I have to have some privacy, give me some space, right? Like, I'm out with dinner with my family. And I really like that. And I thought, okay, yeah, people are going to respond well to that because, like, she's creating a boundary. We're in the mental health era, right? Where people are,
hmm
they have that same feeling. Nope. Hated her. Hated her. And then to the
Yeah.
point where the election, she's like, I definitely will not be voting for this person because this person is. It shouldn't even be fathomable that I would vote for this person because they're such a lunatic and so against my morals. But I'm also not going to endorse this person because they also don't have. But clearly it would never be that person. I just want to make sure you guys know when I say I'm not endorsing someone, it's not this person. That wasn't
hmm
enough. And I'm like, I don't know. I just we've again. I say this phrase over and over. Like we've lost the plot where it's like we don't. We're no longer listening. We're no longer being empathetic. We think that like because we can tweet at someone or DM them on Instagram or comment on their stuff, we think we have this connection and we really know like what these people are going through. And like I think that man, like now the more I'm talking about this, I'm like I really wish that this movie did a little bit more with that because
hmm
his apology it was good enough ish, I guess, but he was doomed. He was doomed, and it's funny because I was even like saying, I'm like, like the famous notes apology people used to do. I'm like,
Yeah.
don't do it, Paul. Don't do it, Paul. Don't do it, Paul. And Paul did it.
Yeah. I mean, at least he did like a video and it wasn't just like a note.
Right.
But I think that would have been really funny if it was like actually a notes app apology. But it is what it is. But kind of like the ending too, like I mean, he still has the same marketing team and whatnot, and it's really interesting when he's going through his cancellation thing. They talk about like, well, maybe we can make him like go into these like and they don't want to say, but they like okay the alt-right movement
Yeah.
talking about
Yeah.
anti-cancel culture, and I'm like, oh man, this film really took it that far, but it's so true, like.
Yeah.
That's
Russell
really
Brand.
how it is, and that just kind of shows like how divided society is because it's like there's so much nuances with people and like everything too, and Yeah, but I thought that was fascinating. Oh yeah, go
Let me
ahead.
ask you a question. Let me
Yeah,
ask
of
you a
course.
question about this same thing we're talking about. Like, what could Paul have possibly said or done to get that grace or forgiveness, or to kind of get back to the Paul that people used to love? Like, was it? Do you think he was just? Was there anything he could have done?
Honestly, I think he was doomed because people already had those perceptions and it was something that was out of his control. And I think that's what makes the story really tragic in the sense of that it was a phenomenon that happened that he
Hmm.
didn't directly do, but he felt like he needed to apologize because it was actually affecting his life to the fact that he couldn't even like go out to eat a lunch or something like that. And that scene broke my freaking heart. Like I rewatched I kind of skimmed through the
Yeah,
movie before we recording and I'm just like that scene always freaking gets me. Because
yeah.
it's like, and that's just a point where you just don't like. I don't wish that upon like anybody, even like in real life. Like you should feel safe in where you are and going out in public too. And I mean, that's kind of like
It's
it's so weird because it's like there's a catch-22 about putting yourself out there, but at the same time, people
right.
should be able to put themselves out there without getting threatened.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and it's crazy to like that you making that statement is even like a hot take, or like it has to even be said. But that's the reality we live in, and like I think that something I've just noticed about society in general is we've lost sort of you know shame, and we've lost respect, and we've lost this idea of like what I'm doing is inappropriate, right? Like because everyone
Mhm.
wants to click, everyone wants to viral. Like I remember when I was a kid, there was an athlete. I was at a bowling alley, and like I think I was like 9 or 10 years old, and I was like, oh, like there's so and so, and I went up to, I was like, hey, can I like say hello or like a picture or something like that? And the athlete was like, no, no, they're too busy, they're with their friends. I hated that athlete to the point where I'm from Boston, and so like everyone would expect you're a Celtics fan. I am not, because that one moment I hated the player and I was
Mhm.
just done. And so like now like, I went to the rival team and everything. And but as I look back as an adult, I'm like, they were at a private moment with their friends, probably their family, just kind of relaxing. Like, if they let me, then where's the line? Where do you draw that of like, hey, you let Tyrone do it, but you didn't let that person. You let this person, but
Mhm.
not that person. And especially even today too, it's like with how charged we are with like race and sex and identity. It's like, okay, did you let this person because of a specific reason? Which goes back to what we talked about with Paul. It's like it all has to do with people's perception and what they're putting onto Paul versus who Paul actually is. Ironically,
Mhm.
the person I'm talking about is Paul Pierce, but
Yeah.
Paul is a is Paul is they're putting their perception in that scene where he's just trying to eat lunch. Oh, that really hurts. It makes you. I think that was probably the first moment too where I was like, is this story about famous people as like well? Are we supposed to have sort of empathy for those people? And I think the answer is yes, because
Mhm.
but the majority of the story is just about everyday regular people. This could happen to you, but it does in the end sort of land in this moment where you kind of go, okay, I do have some empathy for these famous people because it isn't easy. And
Mhm.
to be honest, what they're doing is just their hobby. It's just their everyday life. It's what they do for their happiness. And so the fact
It's
that
their
your happiness
passion.
can bring such yeah can bring such
Yeah.
negativity, it's weird.
Yeah, I think it's very odd and very telling when people kind of want to villainize people for wanting to pursue their passion. And it's like, this is what they signed up for, so I should do this. Like, okay, here's the thing. If there was no actors, right, we would not have people acting in movies. If there were no directors, we would not enjoy, the movies that we enjoy. We would not be talking about this movie right now if there wasn't any type of art. Same thing with athletes. Same thing with
Hmm.
like, I mean, here's the thing, same thing with influencers too. Like,
Yeah.
people want to create content and it's just like, there's just like, you should not allow just like, and I just feel so passionate as a creative myself. Like,
People think
Yeah,
that
yeah.
creatives don't have any value in the world until they actually don't have that, and then they're like, oh my gosh, where's this album, where's this thing, and it's just like, where's
So,
this video, and it's just like, oh, I thought you hated music. You
no,
know?
one person I feel incredibly sorry for, but also, they've been famous forever is Ariana Grande. Like, I think Ariana Grande, the people are going to turn on her because she started out as an actress. That was her thing. Then she
Mhm,
did singing for a while. Now she's doing Wicked, which is kind of blending this too, which is a
mhm,
smart, that's a smart move.
mhm,
Good for her. But she made a statement recently and she was like, "Oh, I want to, kind of come out and get back into my acting roots. That doesn't mean that the music's never going to come back, but it's not going to be released the same way that it was, over the past decade." And I
mhm,
know people are going to be super upset about that and things like that to the point, where she's on a red carpet, right? And she gets teary eyed in interviews and things like that. And someone comments, "Why is this girl always crying? She should be grateful for all the opportunities and blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, we've lost the sense of empathy where it's like she could be just crying because she's an emotional person. She'd be crying because something's going on in her personal life we don't know about. She could be crying, like
absolutely.
we have no empathy anymore, and it's crazy. And it goes back to that parasocial relationship where it's like not only do you think you're owed something, but you feel like you know these people, and we don't.
Mhm,
We don't. Like I don't know. It's crazy. It's scary. It's crazy. It's sad. Like, and
mhm,
that same sort of non empathy that we're giving to these celebrities, now we're seeing it on a level and a scale of just people in our everyday lives. Someone cuts
mhm.
you in line or while you're driving, right? That person's the worst, and that person can be going to the emergency room. That person could be late, pick their kid up, right? Like we don't even for a second think like that. It's
Yeah,
all about, you wrong me or what your perception of that person is. And I
what
don't
they
know if
did in
we'll ever
that
get
moment.
back, to be honest. Yeah, I don't know if we'll ever get back to a world or if we ever were a world like that. But
I
I
don't
don't know,
think we
it's tough.
were.
It's
I
sad.
think we were in a world always judging people for like because that's just how we are as a people. It's like there's scientifically because we take up so much information, we have this thing called
Yeah.
unconscious bias. That's just how we are
Yes.
created as people, and it's really
Yep.
unfortunate how it, as society goes on, how much those unconscious biases actually turn into conscious bias.
No, no,
But
really though. Right.
but
And
for real,
actions.
in actions too, and it's just like, yeah, it's crazy. But kind of going back to this, to dream scenario, Paul gets to a spot because he can never really go back to being a professor. He gets to a spot
Yeah.
where he kind of leans into the dream scenario thing, and in fact, his narrative changes to who he was and how he's
Yeah.
always been, and that part gets me because
Yeah.
okay, I listened to this podcast called You're Wrong About, and it talks about
Hmm.
different things that were kind of like these big news stories that a lot of people get information wrong about, so they try to debunk them. And it's
Yeah.
hosted by a journalist, Sarah Marshall. So she brings a lot of different journalists, and they talk about just different infamous things. And that kind of reminds me, like a lot of things gets misremembered by culture, even though they've experienced the stuff they're like, oh well, this person
Yeah.
did something wrong, like
Yeah. Right.
the
Yep.
Tanya Harding thing. That's actually one of the first stories. Like,
Yeah.
they talk about those things that happened and how they just get so misconstrued,
Yeah. It's
by
the
the
inevitable
media.
nature. Yep. It's the inevitable nature of cancel culture, right? It's like at the end, Paul accepts his fate and he just kind of embodies everything that's happened with the cancer culture. And once someone, and I think really what it's saying is once someone's cast in a negative light, it can be almost impossible to reclaim like your image and who you are. And so he sort of has to accept that. And like he it's sad, he's isolated, he's alienated. And I mean, I can't speak for the rest of the world, but I know in America at least, like, once you have become alienated and isolated, like it's a very depressing down slope from there to just live your own private life and be on your own. And like I think that's kind of why too we like inevitably do this thing now. Like I was saying earlier about Chaperone, I'm like wait, is it drag? I just want to make sure, because you want to make sure you're not trying to like, and I don't think anyone would necessarily fault me. But that's not my default. I don't think people would fault me, but like you just never know, right? Someone clips
You
that one
never
moment
know.
from this, and they clip that one moment from this, and they go, "Oh my God, Tyrone, thinks this is drag and blah blah." And I'm like, that really was not my point. Like you missed the entire point of what I was trying to say, And
Yeah.
but once you go down that path, it's done. And I think that's kind of what this story is saying is like, have a little grace for people, have a little empathy, especially for people who didn't choose this life.
Hmm.
Man, I like
Yeah, and
in
people that have
I
no choice but to live that life, and that's kind of like the point I was kind of going for before I made the "you're wrong about" tangent too. But that was kind of a right one too. Is just like he has to. Well, one, he has to go to France because they actually like him there. So you have to go where you
right, yeah,
love in order to make money,
yeah,
because there is no way that he could be a professor down because everyone's freaking afraid of him.
no,
So he's like leading
right,
into this horror persona, this a Freddy Krueger persona, and and that's just how it is. And and like, and he writes a book, but it's not the book that he originally wanted to write, and that's
right,
like the
right.
tragedy within this whole thing. And then
That
another
was
thing
the
too,
of this. Hmm.
yes, is that other people are profiting off of the tragedy of him getting canceled
Right,
and the narrative
right.
that society has created around him. It's like, oh, well, this is something that's so bad that happened, and yada yada yada. But we made this thing to sell products to you and whatnot. And it's just like, oh man, like even though like I'm in marketing, I do understand like there's some scumminess to it too.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I get it.
Like
I was in
I
marketing
mean,
and
there's
sales. I get
scumminess
it.
in every type of industry. Let's be completely honest. There's
Sure,
no industry
we're in
that's
America.
completely absolved to
Yeah,
people that are scummy, because people are
yeah,
people. But I
yeah.
just found that just very interesting and whatnot. And
No,
this movie is so good to analyze.
yeah, I mean, this is a movie you can keep talking and talking about in different points, and like, I think it's this fame thing is such a double edged sword, and like, fame could be even just when you have a positive experience, it can be bad. Like I was saying earlier, because you get pigeonholed. Like, God, I feel bad saying everybody hates Chris. Tyler James, is his name, right? Um, he for the longest time was just, oh, that's everybody hates Chris. Oh, everybody hates
Hmm.
Chris. And then, he was in The Walking Dead for a little bit. So if you knew him from that, you kind of like, oh my God, he's a legit actor. I never watched The Walking Dead, so when he was in Abbott Elementary, I go, oh shoot, that's
That's correct.
everybody hates Chris, right? And so it's like you can be kind of pigeonholed with that fame too, in a positive sense necessarily too, where like that's just kind of how you become known. And I think what he did really successfully was he never sort of frayed or tried to fight it. He accepted it. He's like, yeah, that was a part of my life. I enjoyed it. I loved it. Now I'm Gregory, right? This is a new part of
Hmm.
who I am. And that kind of works for him. But when you have that negative light, it becomes very difficult to get out of that, depending on how it happens. um
Hmm.
or you kind of get that Russell Brand path where it's like you start going crazy alt right,
Hmm.
and you find your commonality and stuff, and like that creates another issue. And like, not to get too political, some would even argue maybe starts to have an effect on society as a whole, of like you're creating this subculture of people who feel alienated and isolated, so they're looking for someone to sort of attach themselves to. I don't even want to say his name. I'm not going to say his name. It's disgusting, bald headed creep online. And like, people start following that type of man, right? And so they don't have
Hmm.
that true guidance because they feel alienated. So, I mean, I
Hmm.
think this story in the end is just telling us, to have some empathy, because we're all human and we all make mistakes, and we all have, these moments we're not proud of, but like that doesn't need to define us, especially if we're someone who recognizes, hey, whoa, that was, not, I made a bad choice of error there, or I was young, I'm grown, I'm not absolved from it, of course, I did it, but, I am not the same person. So give me some grace. And that's one type of person. But there's a second type of like this Paul type, where it's like they're going to be. more cases like Paul where people just accidentally get famous. You look at kids online nowadays, how young they are.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
If I have kids one day, they will not be online until a certain age. I feel as if they're appropriate and ready for. I saw in Australia they actually just banned that. I believe it's like under 14 or under 16 or something.
That
That'll
sounds
be an
about
interesting
right.
sort of. That seems like a next natural step for us because this is. I mean, this has really become a thing where it's like you have to be an adult to be online at this point. People
Yeah.
just,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, especially with a lot of the content that's online, and I'm like, man, like it's scary out there because like I mean, like we're at the age where it's like, well, we didn't have like social media when we were kids, right?
right.
Like I had my first social
MySpace.
media account. I had my MySpace when I was 14, and I feel like that was about right. Like I
Yeah,
would
it
not.
was honestly, it was too early to be honest.
But honestly, it was too
But
early too, because I didn't
yeah,
get my first Facebook until I was 15. I was so mad because I was just like, I was like, all my friends
same.
have MySpaces and all this stuff. All my
Yeah,
friends have Facebooks. Why can't I have a Facebook? My parents were like, no, not until you're a
yeah,
teenager. And then I'm like, you know what? Now that I'm an adult and I'm just like, and I don't even have kids, but I'm just like,
yeah.
you know what? Shout out to my parents for that. Like, shout out
No,
to
for
them for that.
sure. No, for sticking their ground because like and I remember like when I had MySpace and Tumblr and all this stuff and I was like 12, 13, 14, whatever. And I was like talking to people online and like I thought I was talking to like celebrities or this person or that thing,
Yeah.
right? And like and I think we've all been there, I'm
That's
sure.
before
Like
we
some
knew
people
about
probably embarrassed to
catfishing.
admit. Right, no, right. And like luckily I wasn't someone to like and it wasn't even readily available at the time, not to age myself like I'm an old man, but like I couldn't send photos and things like that, like the way people
Hmm.
can now. This
Yeah.
was just like a conversation thing that I was having with people, and like or Ariana Grande or whoever favorite person I'm talking to, right? And like it was just sort of lighthearted. Someone's trolling me, I'm sure, but like nowadays it can get very serious. Where like you mentioned the catfish thing earlier, where it's like people think they're talking to a celebrity and they think they're talking to someone who and they get blackmailed or whatever the case may be. Like it's just we've reached a point of the internet where I don't know if children should be on it at a certain age. And like you think about
Hmm.
something like this, like think about Paul's situation. Imagine that happens to someone who's like 9, 10 years old because they're watching these role models for men online, right?
Yeah.
And they start repeating the same phrases because they want to be funny or like whatever, right? Like that sticks with them forever now, you know?
Uh-huh. No, it's crazy, and it's crazy how kids are so impressionable. Like even though, and
Yeah.
I have to think about this too, having a platform is like even though yes, majority of my audience are people that are in their like at earliest early 20s but there is a possibility that a young kid could be looking at my content. And, but
Yeah.
you don't have to
Yeah.
necessarily
Absolutely.
make it, because I know when I was like younger too, probably there was some content that I wasn't really supposed to be like looking, nothing too bad, but there were some creators that I was just
Sure. Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like, oh, that's kind of
Expose
like
early.
whatever. Yeah, exposed early. So I'm like, okay, let me be mindful. Like, I already have some video ideas where I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna put it under like a payroll or list something because like
Yeah.
not they're bad, but like
Yeah.
the content itself, like there's movies that I want to review that are not appropriate for children, like whatsoever. I mean, this one's not
Totally.
appropriate for children either, but the messages that are in this movie are really telling, and I think people should watch them. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I had the same thing happen on my TikTok. I've had like, and I think with boys too. Like I said, like so many young boys are looking for role models and people to kind of look up to, and they're looking for because they don't. A lot of them don't have that, or for whatever reason. And so I kind of like it. It's weird. I almost feel the responsibility as someone who is creating a safe space on the internet for others. I feel like I should be inviting them in so like they don't get dragged into the ATs of the world, that gross guy, and like
Hmm.
and and to invite them, but at the same time, I'm like, this isn't my responsibility, and their parents should be sort of doing some of these things. But like, I had this, I was reviewing, I think it wasn't even like something like very like graphic or something, but like there was a couple scenes that just felt very heavy, and there was like scenes about death, and this kid goes, "Oh, I saw this book, at the library. Like, should I?" Because it was I'm blanking on the name right now, but it was a book turned TV series. Station 11, and I wanted
Mhm.
to like the kid was like, "Oh, I saw the book. Like, should I be reading that?" And I was like, "Oh, well, like if your parents say it's okay, I suppose that they should. I think that it's something I'd maybe recommend you once you're in like high school. And it's like, oh, I really liked your review. You made it seem like it was an interesting story. I kind of like, I'm interested in Shakespeare, and I think they were 14ish probably or something. But in like,
Mhm.
it kind of becomes this thing of like, is it appropriate or not? But it's so hard, and we all live such different experiences. But like, I don't know. I really don't know if kids should be on the internet. I don't know if they should be watching certain movies these days. But to kind of like bring this full circle and bring it back to Paul, like all Paul really did was just try to be himself and like the best version of himself, and it it just got misconstrued into this other thing. And I think with kids, but you're so young and like you said, impressionable and so curious, and that curiosity sometimes can become scrutiny for other people who are watching that same thing. So
Mhm.
it's tough. I don't know how you balance that nowadays. I think maybe kids shouldn't be on the internet. Like, I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, as the internet progresses, it gets like more and more murkier and stuff. And I think eventually it has to be a place where it's like there has to be laws into place. But yeah, Dream Scenario, excellent movie. I mean, we didn't really go into too many spoilers, so I would recommend this movie for anyone
Yeah.
who wants to watch it. So definitely check it out. Tyrone, this has been an amazing conversation. Like, thank you so much for being on this episode. It was such a great discussion.
Thank you. No, I appreciate you having me on. Just like I said, it's been some time since I've been on one of these, so it's been like it's been a pleasure being here. And I always love chatting with you. You're someone who always knows how to break down a film in so many complex ways, and like we need more people like you in this space who are like leading the
Thank
charge.
you.
So hey, if I can ever come back or be of assistance, let me know. I'll happily join. And yeah, maybe I can get back into this and have you on as well. But I do appreciate you inviting me, and I'm always welcome to have a conversation. So
Absolutely. You're welcome back anytime. Is there anything you want to plug? You want to plug your socials or whatnot? Even though
yeah,
we talked about
yeah,
social
sure.
media,
So I know, right? Yeah, you're the devil.
the
No, it's
downside of it, but
so
like,
all
by
my
the way, what's your Instagram?
yeah, right. But hey, follow me. Make sure I get paid. Yeah, right. No, so all my everything is the Circle Club. Definitely go to the YouTube page. You'll see some stuff there. That's kind of like I think where I'm going to be doing a lot of my long form. I've been just over the past couple of years writing and writing some stories and things like that that I think will probably not be anytime soon that those are going to be released. But if you like, like I said, science fiction, if you like dramas, if you like, the sex lives of education, or the sex lives of college girls, or you like Game of Thrones, you like Dune, whatever. We have a wide spectrum, and we're always trying to have some good commentary. So if you like that type of stuff, come on over to our page, and join the conversation.
Nice. And if you want to follow me, if you haven't already, it's Megan's World on Instagram and TikTok and Letterboxd. That is MEAGANZ World. And yeah, thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. And again, Tyrone, amazing conversations. Bye. Thank you everyone for listening.